The transistor. The transistor is probably one of the most useful electronic devices. This is one transistor. It's very old now. In this size now, in this package, you can get millions of transistors nowadays. Must be 20 or 30 years old now. The transistor is called a semiconductor device, one of the most useful devices. It's got 3 legs here, and you can't see what's inside because it's tiny, but the electronic representation in circuits for a transistor looks like this. You can see 3 legs, just as we saw on the transistor here. You can see 1 leg, 2 legs, a 3rd leg. This is called the emitter, the base and the collector. And this is one of the most useful devices in electronics. I'm going to give you some examples of 3 common uses of transistors. The first one is as an amplifier. This is the transistor. If you have a microphone here, and a microphone usually produces a tiny, minute electrical signal. Let's imagine this is the electrical signal that is produced by a microphone. If you put that electrical signal into the transistor, into the base of the transistor, what you can produce is amplification. You can get a much bigger signal here than the one that you started out with. So actually the transistor, as if by magic, is acting like an amplifier. Small signal, big signal. If you put several stages of transistors, just like this one, stacked one after the other, you can actually get to pretty big signals that can then drive, say, a speaker. So you start with a very, very tiny electrical signal, and you can get a big signal here that can actually drive a speaker and get some very loud music or speech. So this is a transistor used as an amplifier. Clever, isn't it? The transistor sometimes, and very often actually, can be used as an oscillator. What's an oscillator? An oscillator is a bit like an amplifier that has gone mad and started, say, whistling or started generating a waveform, a signal by itself. This usually happens with some form of what's called feedback, where you get a small signal here feeding back here and getting amplified and going mad. And this generates this signal, spontaneous signal, which actually can be very, very useful, especially at high frequencies where you have a radio frequency oscillator. So this is how actually you can create a transmitter, your own, say, FM station or radio station, to transmit music or speech on the airwaves. So that's the transistor used as an oscillator. Obviously, the transistor doesn't do this by itself. You need to add some components, usually other electronic components like resistors or coils or capacitors, etc., to make this work. But the transistor is really the main active element here. And the last use of the transistor, which you find in all computers now, is the transistor used as a switching device, as a switch. And without going into too much explanation, in this case, you don't feed a variable signal like the one that we saw earlier. You feed either a plus 5 volts or 0 volts, which is either there is something or there isn't anything, and you switch the transistor on or off. So this transistor actually is going through only 2 states. One is off, like a switch is turned off, or the switch is turned on. And this is very useful, actually, to make devices which then become like calculators or deal with binary numbers. This is a typical binary number made out of zeros and ones, and transistors used as a switch on-off can manipulate these figures, and that's how you get transistors. This is how you get computers, sorry. So a computer has, you can imagine, millions and millions of transistors working together to perform all these calculations. So, to summarize all this, I'll go back to The transistor, remember, it's one of the probably the most important device in electronics and the cleverest. You can use it as an amplifier. Small signal gives you a great big signal here. You can use it as an oscillator where it starts generating its own signal, either audio or radio signal, or as a switch, which is what you find in computers. These are the three main uses of a transistor.